Some governments didn't want a quiet death. They wanted a scream loud enough to echo for centuries. In the next few minutes, you're going to hear about 7 execution methods so calculated, so deliberately drawn out, that historians still argue about which one was worse. One of them turned a bronze statue into a musical instrument. One of them used a live animal as the weapon. And the last one might be the slowest way a human being has ever died on record. Stick around, because number 4 alone is going to make you put your phone down. None of this happened in secret. Every method on this list was carried out in public, in town squares, on castle walls, in front of entire cities that gathered to watch. Because death, in these societies, wasn't just a punishment, it was a performance, a warning written in pain, and the people who designed these methods weren't trying to kill efficiently, they were trying to kill unforgettably. So let's start with the one that looks like art, until you learn what's happening on the inside. Number 7, the Brazen Bull Sicily, roughly the 6th century BC. A ruler named Phalaris wanted a new way to deal with his enemies. A craftsman brought him something that looked like a sculpture, a massive bronze bull, hollow, beautiful. Nobody looking at it could guess what it actually was. The victim was sealed inside through a small door in its side. A fire was lit beneath it, and as the bronze slowly heated, the bull became an oven with a person locked inside. But here's the detail that made it infamous. Engineers reportedly built internal tubes running from inside the bull, up through its nostrils. As the victim screamed, the sound was twisted on its way out, until it didn't sound human anymore. To the crowd outside, it sounded like the bull itself was roaring. They thought they were watching a machine. They were listening to someone die. And according to ancient accounts historians treat with some skepticism since the story may have grown in the retelling, the craftsman who built it was eventually sealed inside his own invention to prove it worked. The brazen bull was mechanical, theatrical, but the next method didn't need any of that. No fire, no metal, just time and a cage. Number 6. The starvation cage. In parts of medieval Europe, some crimes weren't punished with a fast death at all. They were punished with exposure. An iron cage, sometimes shaped like a human silhouette, was hung from a castle wall, a bridge, or directly above a town square. Inside, a living person. No blade, no mercy, just days, sometimes weeks, of hunger and thirst while ordinary people walked underneath, going about their lives. Some accounts describe prisoners surviving over 2 weeks before death finally came. And in several documented cases, the cage stayed hanging after the person inside had died, for months, as a rotting reminder to anyone who looked up. The disturbing part wasn't the death. It was how long a person could survive like that before their body simply gave out. That kind of helplessness sounds like the worst thing a punishment could do to someone. It's not even close. Because the next method didn't just take away someone's freedom, it took away their ability to die quickly, on purpose, by design. Quick gut check before we go further. 3 of the next 4 methods are going to be harder to sit through than anything you've heard so far. If you've made it this far, you'll want to see how this ends, because number 1 might be the most drawn-out death ever put into the historical record. Let's keep going. Number 5. Death by 1,000 cuts. Practiced across parts of imperial China for centuries, this method had one objective: stretch out the moment of death for as long as physically possible. This wasn't random violence, it was a trained skill, refined by executioners who studied exactly how much the human body could take before shutting down. Historical accounts describe anywhere from dozens to well over 100 cuts, carried out over hours, each one shallow enough to keep the victim conscious, placed carefully enough to delay death rather than cause it. Witnesses reportedly didn't riot or scream. They fell silent, the kind of silence that comes from disbelief, not anger. And it gets worse, because the pain wasn't the only punishment. In traditional Chinese belief systems, the body was thought to need to stay whole for the soul to move on completely. This method wasn't just built to end a life, it was built to follow the victim past death itself. If you think psychological cruelty doesn't get more calculated than that, wait until you hear about the method that used a living animal as the weapon. Number 4. The rat torture. No blade, no fire, no training required. Just patience, biology, and dread. A metal container was strapped against bare skin, typically the stomach. Inside it, a live rat. Then heat was applied to the outside of the container. On the far side from the victim's body, the rat, trapped and desperate to escape the rising heat, had exactly one direction left to go. What made this method so uniquely feared wasn't just what happened, It was the minutes, sometimes much longer, spent fully aware of exactly what was coming, before it ever started. This method appears in historical accounts across multiple regions and centuries, often used to extract confessions rather than as a straightforward execution. The goal wasn't only death, it was total psychological collapse before the body even gave in. But the next method didn't need a device, a tool, or an animal, just wood, gravity, and a crowd willing to watch. Number 3. Impalement. Few names carry as much dread as the 15th century prince most associated with this method, a ruler whose surrounding forests were, according to legend, lined with victims for miles in every direction. But impalement wasn't crude, it was engineered. Executioners were trained to place a sharpened pole in a way that deliberately avoided immediately fatal organs, meaning death could take hours. In some accounts, days. The victim stayed upright, elevated, visible from a long distance. Multiple historical accounts claim that invading armies who encountered fields of victims displayed this way chose to turn back rather than advance. This wasn't punishment for one crime. It was psychological warfare, aimed at an entire approaching army at once. A message written not in words, but in a landscape of bodies. Even this wasn't the most calculated method on this list, because the next one didn't rely on pain to break someone. It relied on humiliation, spectacle, and slow public destruction, and it worked just as completely. Okay, if you're still with me, here's what's coming. The final two methods aren't just physically brutal, they're two of the slowest, most drawn-out deaths ever documented, and number one is so extreme that historians are still divided on how often it actually happened, versus how much of it was exaggerated for effect. Let's finish this. Number 2. The breaking wheel. Used widely across parts of Europe for centuries, this method turned execution into an event that could stretch across multiple days. The condemned was tied to a large, spoked wagon wheel. Executioners then broke each limb, joint by joint, with a heavy iron rod, while a crowd watched it happen in real time. Once the body had been sufficiently broken, it was woven directly through the spokes of the wheel and raised into the air on a mounted pole, left there, exposed to weather, to birds, to time, visible to the whole town every day for as long as anything remained. This wasn't just an execution, it was a warning renewed every single morning, the moment people woke up and saw it was still there. And there's still one method left that goes even further. A method so slow, historians still debate exactly how long it actually took to kill someone. Number 1. Scaphism, the boats. Ancient Persia reportedly reserved this method for the gravest crimes imaginable, and it's described as one of the slowest deaths in the historical record, though scholars today debate how often, if ever, it was actually carried out versus recorded as legend. As described in ancient sources, the process began with two hollow boats locked tightly together, leaving only the victim's head, hands, and feet exposed. The condemned was then repeatedly force-fed a mixture of milk and honey, then left outdoors, under direct sun, unable to move. The sugar attracted insects almost immediately. Within days, infection set into the exposed skin. According to the ancient descriptions, the body began to decay while the person inside remained conscious. In some versions of the story, for over a week. No escape, no intervention, just heat, infection, and time, stretched out for as long as the body could endure it. Whether or not this method was common, or even real in the way it's described, its place in the historical record says something about how far ancient societies imagined justice could go. History doesn't just remember who won wars or built empires, it remembers what ordinary people were willing to do to each other when the law itself gave them permission. And here's the part worth sitting with. Every method on this list was considered justice by the society that used it. Not chaos, not cruelty for its own sake, justice. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If justice can look this different depending on the century, how much of what we call justice today is really about right and wrong? And how much of it is just what a society has decided it's willing to accept? Which one disturbed you the most? Drop it in the comments, because history isn't done getting darker, and neither am I.